3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon.
Welcome, everyone, to the EdUp Experience podcast. We are so happy to be here with you today. I am stepping in today for your regular host, Joe Salustio. My name is Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson, and I'm joined by a special co-host, a long-time co-host of Joe's, Dr. Chuck Lloyd, and he'll introduce himself here shortly. But we are so excited to bring a special guest here to you today, a newly appointed president of a well-known community college, North Shore Community College in Massachusetts. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to be here.
Good. I want to give a shout out to Elvin, who is handling all of our audio and our recording and our producing today. Thanks, Elvin, for all your hard work. And Chuck, let's go to you first. Let's have you introduce yourself, and then we'll let you take the first question for Bill.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Cantu-Wilson. This is great to be here. And Bill, just look forward to this conversation. Chuck Lloyd, I'm the president up at White Mountains Community College, been up here a little over 6 years. And similar to some of Bill's background, I've been in the community college universe for over 20 years in successive positions, roles, and seen a lot of things. So I definitely look forward to this conversation here. So thanks for having me. I get to ask the first question. Oh, my goodness. So, I think as you introduced Bill, you said newly appointed, and I think you just rounded out, 2 years now, Bill, to the day almost. And I don't know how new you can still be after 2 years. You've probably seen a lot. So my question is, 2 years, what have you seen? What have you learned? What did this job, what has it done to you? What have you done to the two locations at Arlen and Danvers? I'd love to just hear your reaction on the last 24 months.
Well, it's certainly been an exciting couple of years. It's a little shocking to me that 2 years have gone by. I started obviously kind of right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Which was strange, but also there was opportunities in that moment. And, when I first started walking around both campuses at that time, there just weren't very many people here. Now, partially that was July, and July is usually the quietest month of the year, but a lot of people were working remotely at that time. And so it did produce some challenges in terms of really getting to know people. I had some advantages because most of my career I had spent right up the road at Northern Essex Community College. So I did know quite a few people here, but not as their president, and not sort of in this new world we were living in. So I'm happy to say that feels like a long time ago now in terms of the COVID piece and managing that piece. But as I say, I think there was opportunities in that. The college, like I think most higher ed institutions, recognized that the world had changed so much, the college had to as well. And the college was due for a new strategic plan. And so it was a great opportunity to sort of create a blueprint for where we were going. And so a lot of the first year had to do with that. There was some leadership team building here. On my part, as is typical with the presidential transition, sometimes it's not just the president that chooses to take that opportunity to change over. So those were big foci, but really in the last year, we've been very much focused on this new strategic plan, on really meeting the needs of our community as they exist in 2023. And it's really been a fun experience. I'm very much enjoying the job. It is a little tiring, but that's okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that part doesn't go away, the tiring part. They're long days. There's always more to do, but it sounds like you've got a nice foundation built. You've got your team, you've got a plan, and out of COVID, I'm calling the pandemic is over. I'm calling it, I'm not hesitating anymore. Pandemic is over.
I'm with you.
Bill, I was thinking about what you were saying, and I wondered about your campus in particular. When you said you've done a new strategic plan, we know how important that is, and I I worry about campuses that are kind of behind on making sure that they're current with where we are in higher ed, where we are in the country. So what is your what are the demographics of your campus? And what are you most proud of in terms of updating your strategic plan for your campus, your faculty, your staff, and the community?
So the average age here is 26. That's lower than it used to be. So we have a sort of a bit of a youth movement. Though Massachusetts is about to institute free community college for folks over 25 years old, so we may bounce upwards again. About half and half white students and students of color. Low 60 percentage points of women versus men, and I guess that's the vital statistics, at least. Lynn is a really urban campus. That's where I am today. And Danvers is out in the suburbs a little bit. So we have some rural areas in our service area, but also a lot of city living here. We're just north of Boston. So what I'm most proud of in that plan is a refocusing on the whole reason for why students come to college and why the community thinks we're here. And that's to improve students' lives. So the vision of the plan is really about consistently excellent and equitable life outcomes for students. So what we're inviting the community to do is to judge us by what happens after our students leave, not necessarily by what happens while they're here. And so for a transfer student, that means not just going on to a four-year university, but getting that bachelor's degree. If their goal was a bachelor's degree, we should be judged by, did we put them in the best possible position to get that? If they came here hoping to start a career or change a career, did they get that job in that field? And from the community's point of view, is that a needed field? Is that a sector that's important in the community? This is an area very focused on healthcare, life sciences, information technology. So there's boatloads of vacancies in those fields. But I would consider those kind of the sexy opportunities, high-paying jobs. But we also need first responders. We also need nurses, police officers, educators. So those are also really crucial community positions too, even if they get less notice when the economy is talked about. So the focus is there. Really, the rest of the plan is, okay, how do you actually deliver that, right? How do you make sure those good things happen? And I would just underline the part of the vision statement that talks about equitable outcomes,
Yes.
Because like a lot of higher education, that's not the history here. Lots of different students of many different backgrounds graduating every year. But if we break it down and compare white students to students of color, the white students are more likely to graduate or to be retained or to have higher GPAs. And that's something that we really want to address.
I really like that statement. I wrote it down: consistently, equitable, and excellent. I really like that. I think that matters a lot because I'm afraid as a Latina who's got a background in poverty and being first generation, that sometimes institutions of higher education think that equitable means less than, and that it's not the same as excellence. And makes me think of Dr. Robert Vela, who's the former president of San Antonio College, who's now the president of Texas A&M Kingsville. And he always says, demand excellence for yourself. Whoever the student is, whatever their walk of life may be, demand excellence for yourself. And so I really like that you're on the flip side of that. You're saying, we're going to be equitable, but we're also going to demand excellence and provide excellence for our students. You mentioned that you have industry around you that's kind of similar to what we have in Southeast Houston. So what would you say is your biggest workforce related program, and how are those partnerships in your communities, those two cities of Lynn and Danvers?
So undoubtedly, healthcare is the strongest, the largest number of graduating students every year. Probably the group we can most brag about in terms of already being consistently excellent and equitable in terms of outcomes. You know, whether that's nursing, whether that's surgical technicians, whether that's respiratory therapists, et cetera. And one of the things in our plan is something known as centers of excellence. And, you know, like every community college, we have a wide variety of programs here. We're really expected to kind of cover the gamut. But the reality is the community needs are stronger in some areas than others. Healthcare is the number one area where we are really being looked to help solve some of these workforce shortages. So we've got a terrific new center of excellence. We're actually roughly quintupling in size in the next 6 months, called the Bertillon Center for Healthcare Simulation Excellence. And we got a very generous grant from a wonderful alumnus and her husband back in 2018. That center probably got us through the pandemic and allowed us to keep producing the same number of healthcare students, even as the clinical availability went down, because the hospitals, for all the right reasons, sort of locked our students out for a while because it wasn't safe to be there for them. That allowed us to continue those students' education. And so what we're doing this year is taking what has turned out to be a pretty cramped space. We thought it was fabulous when it first opened in 2019. And we're really simulating almost an entire hospital floor. So there's an ER, there's an ICU, and it's big enough so that the various groups of healthcare students can work together, the nursing students, the respiratory therapists, et cetera, just as they do in a hospital. The original center only had room for one program at a time, and that's better than nothing. But nurses don't only work with nurses, they work with lots of other types of professionals. So that's an example of where we're sort of putting our money where our mouth is. That's the regional need. We're going to go out and find funding to create these centers of excellence. And a big part of making that simulated hospital floor truly realistic is tight partnerships with the big hospitals in our region, longstanding partnerships with those institutions. But you know, we're updating the partnership for 2023 and recognizing the challenges that are facing those hospitals.
That is outstanding. What do you think, Chuck? Are you
I was
impressed?
just going to say, if you don't mind if I jump in, number one, Bill, I want to come down for a tour sometime. Your neighbor to the north here. I want to come down. Sounds
Absolutely.
like just some exciting work, number one. And number two, I'd love it if I could go back to, it sounds like you've got legislation. I had heard about this coming forward. It sounds like it's getting to the finish line. We've got something similar, not age restricted, but I'd love to hear, the over 25 free community college, just some of the, I haven't heard the background behind it, the reason for choosing that age, and if there are any restrictions around programs, or if you could just give us an overview of that. I'm really curious to hear what that's going to look like.
Sure. So the governor, our new governor's proposal brought out not long after she came into office is called MassReconnect, and we're using the reconnect term from some other states that have already done this work, Michigan and Tennessee and North Carolina. And her proposal was for 25 and up. I do think that's the way at least Tennessee started. And I think one reason for starting with a smaller group as opposed to everybody is because there's a recognition that this is a great big change and implementation will be challenging. This is a really good policy change for the state and for students and for the economy. But that doesn't mean it's easy. This is a last dollar program. So the bureaucracy behind it will be substantial. And our state Senate president is very interested in bringing this to all students. And so we're looking at this, we'll see what happens with that proposal, considerably bigger idea and bigger price tag. But we're looking at this year as sort of a pilot, a breaking in period. But it's very much focused on the workforce needs.
Yeah.
And if you look at the biggest city in my region here, which is Lynn, bachelor's degree attainment level is around 20%. And the number of adults in the community that could have a better standard of living, given all these available jobs, is really sizable. And it's a great opportunity to invite them either back again to college if they were here once before, or to come to college for the first time and relieve the financial challenge that would be involved in that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it feels like a workforce program, and upskilling, a reskilling, a some college, no credential. I was just doing some work for us in New Hampshire, and, we have roughly 100,000, 102,000 adults with some college, no credential. In Massachusetts, it's over 600,000.
Right.
So you have, some of them are ripe for the picking, but I'm curious to see if a last minute amendment gets in there for the 18 and over, the high school students. So we'll be watching closely just north of you.
Absolutely. We're excited about it.
Good for you.
Well,
Congrats. That's big.
That is exciting for me because I'm familiar with promise programs. Very familiar with those last dollar, promise programs for the graduating classes in the service district. That's happening over here in Texas, Dallas College, and the college where I'm a trustee, San Jacinto College, has an excellent program as well. And I have to tell you, Bill, I have never thought about or even heard about that type of initiative where we're looking at legislation for a population based on age above what we're used to, or above what we consider as the captive audience, right, for getting into higher education. But as you think about non-traditional students and the opportunities that are there, like you mentioned, for already being in the workforce and just needing to come back and get that credential, or pivoting, or like you said, Chuck, upskilling and reskilling, it really makes it feel a lot more inclusive. It really does remove that impression of a community college that, it's just for the younger students.
Right.
It's for everyone. It is a community college for everyone in the community. So I think that's wonderful. I'm going to be following that closely. And Chuck, you said in New Hampshire, there's also similar possible legislation?
Yeah, so I'm not sure when this episode will be released, but we're doing a press release in 2 weeks, and a media event. We are rolling out a promise program. So right now, the details we're finalizing, but likely household income under 50,000, everyone goes to school for free. So requirement to fill out the FAFSA. It is a last dollar. It's a promise program. And for us, we did get some good funding from the state of New Hampshire. We are no longer 50th in funding for the country anymore, just with that.
Oh my gosh.
We're excited to go in the right direction. So the state of New Hampshire was very good to us this year, and frankly going to be great for our citizens and taxpayers.
Well, I'm excited for you too. I'm going to be following that as well. Well, this is exciting stuff. And I'm going to pivot a little bit, Bill. I hope you don't mind, but my background is faculty support and faculty development. And so I'm curious, a new president, I know you said you've been there 2 years. A new president is still a pretty big change. That doesn't happen very often. And so just thinking about what that experience has been like for your faculty, how has that been a positive for your particular campus, your energy and your experience, and hopefully your sense of humor, and hopefully your sense of grace? But how's that team building experience going 2 years in?
So I think it's going very well, and obviously the faculty would be the best people to ask that question to, right? But I come from the faculty ranks. I taught for about 10 years up the road, and so I've never stopped thinking like a teacher, even though it's been a long time since that was my main job. you know, the good news about that is I know what they're going through in April when they're dragging and when their students are dragging. And I know that that's not a good time to launch a new initiative that really involves faculty energy and enthusiasm. The bad news perhaps for them is that I know often where the bodies are kind of buried, right? And I don't accept.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I don't accept excuses really about why students might not be performing better that I don't believe are genuine. I know we can change. I know we can adjust. And so, you know, I have high expectations for my faculty, but one of the joys of coming here was recognizing how ambitious the faculty are themselves. And so I'm sure Chuck knows all about this. One of the keys to good leadership is how do you empower them to pursue their own ideas, their own creativity in support of the institutional goals. And, you know, one of the beauties of that vision statement that we created, and it was the planning process was very inclusive of faculty, is it focuses on students. And when you focus on students, a lot of the other disagreements that can happen in an institution can be put aside because everybody wants success for the students. And so it's been good. We chose to move away from a 2-silo model with student affairs and academic affairs being separate in the first year to a provost model. And we hired a new provost. And that was something I tiptoed around a little bit when I first got here. But the faculty were much more enthusiastic about the idea than I first suspected they might be. And I said, even if we hire somebody with a student affairs background instead of a faculty background, and they said yes. And then they backed that up when I did that, 6 or 7 months later. And, you know, we have an assistant provost who does have that teaching background. But boy, if you don't have that relationship right, you might as well, you know, just hang it up, because the faculty really are the heart and soul of the college's operation. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it's the mixture of have high expectations and also have their backs, help them develop and empower them.
Right, absolutely. I was thinking about that provost model that you mentioned, and I think one of the reasons that that's so important, I'm former faculty as well. How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, I came up through the student affairs ranks, but I've been teaching since 07 and grad, post-grad, undergrad. So.
Well, I mean, if you think about that, and especially because you have that experience in student affairs, we know that division exists. And it's baffling to me because your student affairs folks are the first faces, and you cannot do without them. And the relationships that they form so quickly with students, those touchstones that they become, that's what gives the student the bravery, you know, to come back and make it across that parking lot into the building and into the classroom. That said, once they're in the classroom, we know that they're going to spend the majority of their time with their faculty. And so we want to make sure that, you know, those faculty are prepared for the students that they have instead of the students that they think they have. And so for your population of students and for your faculty, were there any growing pains around equity issues or learning to have a mindset around inclusivity and acceptance of the things that students are really facing, like mental health issues, you know, food insecurity, all of those basic needs, challenges that we know that students are having, that it's upon us to identify versus them to tell us?
Yeah, those issues were very much a driver in their enthusiasm for the model, because they recognized that as a faculty member, I can often raise the alert, right? That this student's got a real financial issue here, or this student's living in the backseat of a car right now. And they knew that the old org structure was too disjointed for that to happen smoothly. And Michelle, you're right. It doesn't take much for a student in that situation to just sort of grab the parachute and leap out of the college. And it needs to be smooth and quick and easy, the intervention. And ideally, and this is something that our plan calls for, let's get to the point where we never get to the emergency. Let's know our students so well the minute they walk in that we can predict there could be a child care issue with this student, bunch of young kids at home, or there could be a this or that with this student. And let's have a team of people ready to help them that includes faculty. That's the goal. We're not completely there yet, but a lot of the enthusiasm for the model came from a recognition that, wow, our students have a lot more than just, the normal academic type challenges that college students have.
You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
amazing.
If you don't mind if I jump in, I mean, everything you're talking about here, it sounds like just, pathways work. You have a foundation of, you went to Aspen's Leadership Fellowship, AACC, American Association of Community Colleges. You did some local leadership training. I mean, I've got to ask you, are you into guided pathways work? Are you doing anything, whether it's Achieving the Dream, Complete College America? I'd love to just hear, it sounds like everything I'm listening to is there's a foundation here. I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge framework for the way I think, and I think the beauty of it again is it connects to just common sense and what students and their families would expect them to get, and which unfortunately probably happens way too rarely in higher ed, not just in community colleges. But yeah, I mean, my previous job as a provost, I worked for 5 years on a pathways sort of version for Northern Essex, and learned a lot of lessons in that. And I'm sort of by instinct over planner. I sometimes try to over organize things. And one of the lessons of that, even though it had a lot of successes, was that I wasn't giving all of the individual people and pieces and offices involved in the effort the room they needed to sort of solve problems themselves. And so that is informing my work here. And of course, the job's different here. And I have to, as a former provost, I have to tell my new provost, if you find me reaching over the seat here and attempting to drive, you need to tell me to get back in the back seat. So I try to stay out of it, but my advice always is, yes, we need the structure Pathways gives, and make sure we leave enough room for that creativity, because the people who work in my financial aid office or student engagement or our faculty, they know the students better than I'm ever going to know them. I work hard to know them, but they're always going to have their fingers closer to the pulse.
Yeah, and that's well said. I mean, there are structures certainly, but within those, there's individuality. And I always think of guidance as those bumpers. If you go bowling and you put the bumpers in there, they're to keep you in the middle somewhere. But there's a lot of flexibility. You could still miss, but you could still have a better chance to hit down the middle. Well said. Well said, Michelle. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask another question. What's the rule here?
Please go ahead, enjoy. I mean, Joe and I had this thing where he could sense my enthusiasm about a topic, even if we were off camera. So I don't expect you to be there, Chuck. We just met, but I do expect you
to. We're close. It's my neighbor to the south here. I'm getting all excited, but we're talking about pathways a little bit. We're talking about newness. Still in a couple of years. There's this mantra that I've lived by, and I think I picked it up at AACC, that it takes 3 years to get things where you want them, to build a foundation before you can really start making some of those change. I want to ask you to fast forward to year 4, 2 years from now. what do things look like? What is new and going on, and what are you responding to in your community? I heard you talk a lot about the workforce and how you've really mirrored your programs, really the true definition of a community college, mirroring your programs after the workforce needs. What does that look like 2 years from now? I'm not asking for pie in the sky 10 years, but yeah, you sound like a planner and an over planner, self-admittedly. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts of where things are going.
But part of doing well with that, with staying ahead of things, is always studying, always listening. I was at a terrific local Future of Work symposium yesterday, where our local four-year public university had done some research, and as much as you think about a region or an economy, you can get startled sometimes. So despite those big hospitals, despite some big life sciences players, the vast majority of the economy on the North Shore of Massachusetts is employers with 20 people or less. And it is an interesting challenge to serve 1,000 of those businesses versus one or two large hospitals, right? And how do you absorb and understand their needs and pivot toward what that is? It's a very different relationship than you'd have with a giant employer. So that's something that I think we need to think about a lot for the future. And although I don't consider myself a huge techie, it is very clear that things like artificial intelligence are going to transform a lot, whether we want it to or not. And so getting on top of that and understanding how technology like that or different ways of organizing that come from that allow you to solve problems like, what am I going to do with all of these small businesses who need people too, and who have specific entrepreneurship or other skilling needs that we could help them with. And so I hope we are doing a great job with those centers of excellence and meeting the big, very public needs. But I also hope we're already sort of in our brains, if nothing else, onto the next thing, because we are not dominated by any one industry, or certainly by even a small number of businesses.
I'm so glad you mentioned I call them the mom and pop shop, 20 employers or less. I gave a presentation yesterday and people said, well, how do you get to them? And really, frankly, that's the ground game, right? That's the knocking on doors. If somebody stops to come to a meeting with you, they've got to stop the work that's happening. But those are also the folks that are sponsoring little league teams and getting engaged in the community. So that's really what we're about. So that's I'm excited to hear you say that. It's truly an operation.
Yeah, last week I was at a prayer breakfast, and here in Lynn, there's well over 100 churches, organized churches, and huge part of the community here, and working with them to make sure that we understand the people that are in those churches and their needs is one avenue for being on the ground like that.
Yeah.
Good plan. Good plan.
Chuck, that was a really good question, because it drove us straight into the community and really who the students are and how they can turn around and become a more powerful part of the community through workforce, of course, through economic input, and then also through leadership. And you said, Bill, that those skills that our students need moving into these mom and pop shops, as you said, Chuck, these small businesses versus moving into, let's say, corporate or a hospital or something. I wonder if those are different skills because of the people element, because of the integration within the community element, right? So I've been to focus groups through Texas Pathways and Texas Association of Community Colleges, where employers like nursing organizations and the like are saying they're lacking critical thinking, They're lacking, problem solving skills and things like that. And so I definitely see like that deficit mindset in the corporate space. But then when I look at what you're talking about, those small businesses, what are the skills that our students need to have in community colleges to work in the local small companies? Is it different from what industry is asking for? Is there something else that we're not focusing on, that we could highlight, or even have a positive mindset about, right? An asset-based mindset about the skills that they develop at the community college that are a good fit for these small businesses?
Well, yeah, I mean, given the trials involved in starting and running a small business, a deficit view of the world is not a healthy one, to operate and run one of those businesses. But some of the skills are exactly the same. A small business person has got to understand, their numbers, their financials, obviously. Little bit different than a giant organization, but I do think, as you said, those businesses live and die in the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what I see, in especially some of our younger students, I see it in my own kids, is this belief in a more holistic view of the world. It isn't just your job, it isn't just your company.
Yep.
That your business is part of a community. And so sponsoring the Little League team, or participating in something that isn't going to make you a profit today,
Right.
is seen, I think, naturally by a lot of people of the younger generation as the right thing to do anyway, but also it will ultimately be good for the business because people will remember that your donut shop or your car repair shop was there for them. And so I do think, what soft skills is the most overused term, maybe.
I know.
But that relationship building is really crucial. And that's not to say that's not important in a Fortune 500 company too, but I think it probably manifests differently. And I think managing a small staff is actually very different than managing a large staff. And so, a sole proprietor really needs almost the whole gamut of skills, whereas as a college president, if I'm missing something, I can hire a really good person to work for me that will help fill in that
That's
gap.
the truth.
And so being wide in your skill set probably is more important for those folks.
Yeah, I love that relationship building piece, Chuck. Don't you agree? I mean,
I was just going to say the same thing. It's partnerships, it's relationships, but there's also the Jack or Jill of all trades expert of none. Of some days, I'm thinking of a restaurant manager, locally. I'm in the North Country. We have a ton of mom and pop shops. I know exactly what you're talking about. Some days you're out front as the cashier, you're the hostess, you're the waitress, you're cooking, you're bartending. I mean, I'm just thinking of people literally spinning around in 5 different positions, and you've got to know a little about everything. And if you're not the expert, it's okay, because someone's not coming to you because you're a 5-star chef. They're coming in because they want a nice warm meal and eat out in an experience. So it is a little different. It's a different feel. Bill, I am curious. You're on the North Shore. We've been talking for 45 minutes and we haven't talked about fishing yet. Where does the North Shore and Gloucester and fishing, where does that all fit in?
So there is a big blue economy movement here, which is understanding the larger maritime opportunities. And it's interesting how different people define that. And I'm sure the fishing folks, and the folks that process the catch, Gloucester is a real center for that, would have one point of view about that, whereas often I would say the more 2023 dominant part of the conversation is about the environment and the health of the ocean. Salem is actually lining itself up to be a major player in the offshore wind world, because it has the interesting, unique characteristic of being one of the few port that is deep enough and doesn't have a bridge or an airport screwing up your ability to take those massive turbines out to sea. So it's lining itself up very nicely. And of course, Salem is a long time whaling port from the old days. That's how it got sort of rich and powerful originally. And so it's returning in many ways to its roots. But fishing, like a lot of other industries that have been around for millennia, right? It is becoming a different game, right? It's becoming a technology game and very much a financially challenging game. So I say that all the time when I visit high schools. I say, you may have an idea for your work. You may think it has nothing to do with college, but there's probably skill sets we can help you with, even if you're not coming here to get an associate's degree. So we're still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. I had to ask.
I love
Very,
that you
very,
did.
very
I love
good,
that you
tasty
did.
seafood here.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I have 2 new places that I can visit, y'all. I'm in Houston, so I'm expanding my reach in the seafood world. I'm very excited. Bill, it has been so awesome talking to you. I'm gonna roll us into the last 2 questions that we always ask on the EdUp Experience podcast. And the first one is, and you can just take both of them one after the other. The first one is, what do you see as the future of higher ed? And then the next one is there anything that we have not covered that you want to highlight about your particular campus, your region, or any successes that you've had?
Sure. So I think the best way to think about the future of higher ed is to make sure not to start right in the beginning, to frame it as not the way we sort of the traditional higher ed model, but essentially the entire world of post-secondary education, because I think we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner in the US with an overemphasis on the traditional college route as the only route.
Right.
And that's never been true. And it's really not true. And it really disserves both students and the community. And that's why we're hurting for electricians and plumbers and all these other folks.
Yes.
Who, frankly, can make a very, very good living and have a great life in that kind of work, where they truly do not need an associate's degree. And telling them they do, or telling them that that's a bad pathway in life because people should go to college and you should work in a white collar job. So I think the future of higher ed, if it's going to be successful, is to think of it more holistically and not just as traditional college. And then if we could all of us in higher ed and connecting to secondary ed, make it clearer, simpler, make the different pathways more obvious for students and their families to understand really what all of the choices are. And to stop, and this is coming from a Harvard graduate, stop rating ourselves by the college we get into and its pickiness on who gets in, and rewarding guidance counselors in high schools for that. Because, and you're probably both aware of Raj Chetty's work about, which colleges actually bring the most value, economic value to students. And it's not the Harvards of the world. And if in policy we were incentivizing students to go to those places, whether those are regional public universities, which tend to show up high on those lists, or community colleges, which tend to show up higher on those lists, or things that aren't colleges at all, but that represent really good pathways for people. And I mean, we've got both the old models there, like apprenticeships and things like that, but you've also got, boot camps and all these other things that are coming along with the new technology. And so getting better at that and putting our brains to organizing that in a way. I know there's lots of work on credentials, but if you think about 100 years ago, 120 years ago, when the credit hour got created, some people had to put some thought into organizing what was developing then, and it feels like that's necessary now. And if we could do that, I think we'd have happier students and probably a better balanced workforce and economy. So that's where I'd love to see us go.
Outstanding.
And here's my happiest story since I got here. The current Massachusetts Secretary of Education, a gentleman named Dr. Patrick Tutwiler, was the superintendent of Lynn Schools when I arrived here. And a month or two after I got here, Pat came to visit me, and he said, what do you think about starting a high school on your campus here in Lynn? Because the state's offering some grant money, and it would be a full 4-year high school. So, like, imagine, here I am. I haven't even met everybody at the college yet, right? And what I already knew, and this is not a criticism, it's just a reality, is if I had said, well, I need to talk to my people, I would have come back with 100 reasons why it's going to be hard. And
Chuck
I
was
knew
shaking his head no.
yeah, and I just said, Pat, yes, let's do it.
Wow.
So that set off 9 months of frenzied work so we could start last fall with a freshman class of roughly, I think we started with 72, we ended up with 83 because we picked some freshmen up in the spring term. Of those students that were with us for the entire year, freshmen, these are 14 and 15-year-olds from the Lynn Public Schools, 82% of them earned 12 college credits this academic year that's ending. So they are
In
almost
one academic year.
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
outstanding.
freshmen, by the way, freshmen
That
courses.
is outstanding.
Connecting that too. Wow.
And I'm a huge believer in early college. I don't really believe there's a whole lot of magic wands in the world, but if you care about social justice, early college is a proven model. And Michelle, your state is light years ahead of Massachusetts in the early college world. But I think we're finally getting it here. And that little high school we're going to have is less than 10% of North Shore Community College's early college effort. But it's really, really valuable, and it's a symbol. It's a symbol of thinking differently about how high school happens and how it connects to college and what you can expect of not just any high school student, but high school students from an urban district with all of the normal challenges. And probably for many reasons, because Pat's an amazingly talented gentleman. He ended up as Secretary of Education for our new governor, but I'm sure part of the reason is that that way of thinking, right? Let's break the mold. Let's be bold. And I'm very excited about the school itself, but also sort of what it says to the community and to the people here at North Shore Community College. We're going to think big. We're going to be bold. Maybe we won't do something like that every single week, right? But we're not going to be afraid to do it when we think we should, because it's going to pay off for those students and for the community.
It is. And when you sit on that graduation stage and you have those students stand up, in a few years and recognize that enormous accomplishment, it is going to be a feeling like no other. I've been present at those ceremonies, and it is just so empowering and such a proud moment for the families, that their children are doing this enormous thing, earning college credit while they're in high school. It's life-changing. It's community changing. So congratulations on that. Before I close this out, Chuck, did you have any closing thoughts for Dr. Bill?
There's a whole book to be written in 3 words that Bill just said, and it's start with yes. You don't consult with your team if it feels right. If you think it's something that's going to be great for the college, you figure it out. If it's great for the community, start with yes. And then you just talk for 10 minutes about the reality of what was great for those students and their families and the community, and I can go on, but start with yes. And to me, that's one of the most important things you just said, and that should be the theme of this podcast from today. Start with yes, and let things fall out where they do. But 9 months of craziness, it sounded like, but the fruits of your labor are going to be there. I think you're doing an excellent job. I appreciate being on just to listen, and Bill, I frankly look forward to connecting with you in person at some point.
Happy to have you down. Happy to come up and visit too.
Sounds great. Thank
Well,
you. Doing some great work.
can I be the first to predict that there will be a book forthcoming from Dr. Chuck Lloyd and his co-author, Dr. Bill Heineman, entitled Start with Yes. And it was born
Yes.
here on the EdUp Experience podcast. We're bringing it to you first, and we're so excited. I'm serious, Chuck. That was outstanding. This podcast creates books, just so you know. Commencement by Joe Salustio and Kate Colbert and Elvin Freitas is out and available for your institution of higher education. It has been such a pleasure. Dr. Bill Heineman from North Shore Community College in Massachusetts, my co-host, Dr. Chuck Lloyd from White Mountain Community College in New Hampshire. This has been a great conversation. I know that you feel the same way I do. We could go on for another couple of hours, but you are college presidents and you have work to do. So we are going to let you go. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and to our audience. Be sure that you look us up on all social media platforms. Download episodes. EdUp Experience has now exceeded 300,000 downloads, have interviewed more than 224 community college presidents. I think we just hit 225. If you're in higher ed and higher ed adjacent, and you're not listening to this podcast, you're missing out. We look forward to connecting with you. And gentlemen, y'all have a great day. For our audience, you have just ed up.
It's time to level up. The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin